subsequent to the show opening. These are new. That's that's the entry to the Bassin de Arsenal, which is a place that I'm kind of really in love with. And these are the new pieces, the brand new pieces, which I think are kind of really show another kind of departure. These are pieces that didn't make it into the show. We'll get to those in a minute, but that's that point looking at the eastern corner of La Villette, and that's the western, and that inlet, I guess you'd call it the Bassin de La Villette. And then that's from the Pont de Bir Hakeim, looking at a little bit of the Eiffel Tower, and that kind of spread towards the east. But I'm really entranced by the west of Paris right now, and the northeast always. But I'm going to be doing a lot more work in that area.
The water's great.
Thank you. So,
very reposing.
thanks. Yeah, something clicked again.
Are you a
and I'm
Pisces?
Yeah, I am.
Ah, okay. Well, that's even more reason for the great attraction.
How funny. Well, nobody's asked me that in 25 years, probably. And you?
Balance.
Ah. Well, you must be fairly acute if you could pull that one out of your hat. So look,
Yeah.
these are pieces that didn't make it into the show. That's from a little square back behind the Sacré-Cœur. I can't recall the name of it off the
It
top of my
feels
head.
familiar.
Yeah, it's just one of these weird little intimate places up in the 18th. And this is
So what do? You go there, you sit there, you just don't think, and you just...
well, I'm kind of like a detective also, because a lot of this is the detective work before anything gets done. And in some cases, it's weeks and sometimes more in process. You don't know my work before this, what I did with landscape stuff. My last show with Yenny actually was, I should show you a picture after what some of these pieces. They're very, very detailed, long, like cinemascope pieces in pencil of particular places like the Palais Royal or the Square de Dauphine or Le Arène Lutèce. But these, I've kind of gone a little bit further. These are both one place, and Yenny likes these a lot, but they did not make it into the show.
How come?
There was just too much other stuff. We had to save 15 of these large format pieces. They're in the book. You'll have the book and you can look at them. But this is, what's the name of that park? It's Monceau.
Yeah, in the 17.
Exactly. So that's the pool and the weeping willow tree at Monceau. And it could have been in the show very easily, that one especially. It relates to a lot of the other work so much, but too bad. That's the Maison Rouge that Utrillo grew up in, up on Montmartre. And I love that piece too, but you have to say stop.
Yeah, everything is always hard.
Yeah. This is another recent one that I really, really love, this blue boat on the Har Kon in Tel Aviv. And again, there's no reason for it to not be in the show. It just, other pieces won, you know? That's the Breaks Kid. And another one, recent one from Tel Aviv, the Breakers, and just some dance.
Have you had a show in Tel Aviv?
I have, but not of this work. And it's a frustrating scene there for the artists who live there anyway. Their union has broken down, and they're culturally being condemned and contaminated. So their options are to leave the country or to let the oldest generation have a living. So they're not, the young ones I find are splitting in droves to places like Brussels, Antwerp, Berlin, here, New York. everywhere they can.
Wow.
They're just fucking off because it's sort of like a system that has stopped supporting its people, and so they, especially if they're making kind of radical art, they're out of there. But it was this body of work that I did show probably almost 20 years ago. Some of it there. So this is going back to New York, and this work is just here for the duration of the show. But I'll show you a couple of the book that was done with this is, yeah. So it's about musicians in rehearsal, and it's really pretty much the 90s.
Feels like it.
Yeah. And so I'll whip through the ones that are here. I think there's some 20 of them, and then it goes to Paris. A little bit of Paris here, because we have some of this stuff. And I did a fun project actually at the Pompidou. We'll get to that in a minute. That's Circle X. Bernard Zecri was their manager for a minute, and they did a project with Sordid Sentimental back in the 70s there. By the way, after saying goodbye to you last night, and probably 3 hours later hearing that Glenn O'Brien had died, it really shook me up. I was thinking of that great book that he did with Jean-Philippe Delhomme, the How to Be a Man, and so happy to have a copy of it. I think it's like one of those super zeitgeist kind of books. I don't know if you were friends with Glenn or not. I knew him peripherally, but you know,
peripherally. Yeah, for me too. Yeah.
Okay, but I did have a major respect for the guy, and it made me sad.
Yeah, I agree.
The Bush Tetris and Laura's passed. So many of these, you know, but whatever. Look, so the book that was done, Ruby Ray from Research and Search and Destroy was the art director of it. It was very beautiful, but it wasn't the ideal. The ideal book for me would have been in the format like similar to what we created here, in a long format, but doesn't matter. It doesn't seem so terribly important to tell you who all these people are, but if you want, I'll say some. Some of you'll know. That's just a guy who was a choreographer who was really into oscillator synthesizers, and this was done by looking at a middle room through the doorways of two adjacent rooms. So on one night I was focused that way, on the other night that way, and often these kinds of situations wind up being technically difficult and fun. Just, you know, and that's what's common with the paysage work and portrait work is you put yourself out there when you're doing this work. You have to just let people walk by and make comments or whatever. You make yourself invisible, because if you were out there working in the world, you just have to do it. And every time you do it is like walking on air or something. It either you just shut all the extraneous stuff out or not. That was done at 2 rehearsals before the show at the Cooler. It's the Silver Apples in Simeon, the 60s New York band, and they made a reappearance in the 90s for a little while, I think, again. But he's somebody really from that kind of epic as well, of people like Tony Conrad and the Velvet Underground and Angus MacLeese and the rest. And it was Holly Solomon who brought him kind of out of retirement.
I did a fashion show at her.
With Holly?
Yeah, once in her apartment and once on 55th, was it? Her gallery when she moved uptown. She was a character.
She was a character. She was.
She had a good eye.
Yeah.
And a foul mouth.
Yeah, she was a trip. And so you know Tom as well then, I imagine, her son, who was kind of a little art mover and shaker in L.A.
Yeah,
Of course,
I don't remember him. I remember her husband and her. I don't remember her son.
I wound up showing with her around the time that I won the Pernaut Award, and they never even bothered to go over and see the work that I was doing. It was sort of like one thing didn't really have anything to do with the other. If it was outside of her her orbit,
Yeah.
it was very difficult for her to think to go out of it, but she did. She probably went to Brooklyn before anybody. And don't forget who showed all these fucking graffiti artists. It was Sidney Janis. I mean, we're talking, these uptown people gave a lot of folks like a livelihood that they're still engaged with, like Toxic. Do you know Toxic? Yeah. He's in Florence now, but he was here for many, many years. Anyway, you know, this peripheral life of these subterranean, cavern-dwelling musicians is a whole other thing, you know. I'm glad that I covered that waterfront, because it's gone. These people don't exist, and New York can't sustain them. There are weird places like New Orleans or Hartford, Connecticut, or some god-awful, you know, I don't know what. But
Somewhere they can afford the rent.
yeah, and do it. When I look at this, he's somewhere in Germany. I don't know where about him. She's in Australia. She's in the Southwest. It's Kid Congo. He's in Connecticut, and he's in London. It's Jim Sclavunos playing with Nick Cave. That's, you know, most of them still, if they're still kicking, have a living. I was working with lacquer made from bugs.
Bugs.
Yeah, this is actual bug generated lacquer. That's the Blues Explosion. This is probably the only one that's in a vertical format. She was a comedian called Naoko Nozawa, who's very, very known in Japan during the punk era, and then came to the States. Some of these are here from Paris as well. That's my friend Jasmine Yarsoufian in one of her combos. And I guess the music community probably knew about my work here before most people in the art world, because of certain things and my contact with that world. It seems like the people, you know, it's not a far stretch for the musicians because so many of them are artists. It wasn't a far stretch. So when I got very deep into this project, it was easy to just go invisible. They didn't feel any pressure with me being around and getting what I needed. And so many of these situations are literally these people who are together for a couple of weeks jamming. When I look at these things, I think, oh my God, how diverse. Because a lot of them are. Or how many are dead.
It's like looking at a Nan Golden exhibition.
Well, that's funny, but you know, time keeps marching.
Yeah.
These two had a bar in Brooklyn for years called Daddy's, and there are two girls I know from Detroit who I actually met them in New York, but they're called the Rogers Sisters, and this one, Letha, she was married as well to Dan Melchior, and they lived in North Carolina. She died last year. Yeah, these are people from this subculture of garage rock and trash and experimental music and so forth.
So they'd all be like in their 60s or 70s?
No. I mean, actually, like, no. But some go way, I don't know if I have any of my work here with Suicide, who I've done a hell of a lot of work with, but yeah, Alan was 75 when he passed, or Tony Conrad I've done a lot of work with, but this is a Throbbing Gristle, and we'll get to that in a second. But most of these people, I would say, the majority of them are in their 40s and 50s. Samoa and Kembra Fowler. Do you know Kembra?
No, but I know Throbbing Gristle.
Yeah, we're going to get to them. But a lot of this project was about the dynamic of rehearsal, of who's in, who's out, who's the genius, who's the pain in the ass, who's the what's going on in this dynamic emotionally. And here in this one, you can really kind of see it. They're freezing in some basement, and that guitarist is flying, you know, and they're kind of taking a cue from him. One of those bands that was together for a minute. But what changed here in Paris was instead of working in such a local way, I started working in a more international way. And so I got to work with bands like Tuxedo Moon and Throbbing Gristle and Patti Smith and so forth. And Danielle Dark, and I'll show you that in a minute. She was gonna be something someday.
But she's dead.
No. That was done at the sound checks. You know, I wind up doing roughs, like Wallace Wood would say. Do you remember Little Annie Fanny from Playboy magazine?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He would work from roughs, and so I would try and get all this minute information and then transpose back in the studio. And so it's Genesis, a couple versions of Genesis after he had made his transition, and Chris and Sleazy and Cozy. I know that Cozy now has written her autobiography, and as well Come Emissions has this big show in Hull, and yeah, I'm so happy that I had a chance to do a piece with them. I knew Jen from California days. He's a character. And he's fit in with New York rather well. This is odd, because this is like, it's Pavement when they came back together again, and it was done here. And it's a little bit, it's a different kind of a trip. It's done with pen and ink in a different way. It's just got a very different feel than the rest.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure it didn't make the book. The editor didn't care for it, but others do. That's Warren Ellis from probably 97 or 98 here in Paris. 98, I would imagine. The only one I have left of him. Of course, now he's got the big beard, and he's Nick Cave's main collaborator. And then this is a series that I again worked from roughs, and then worked out the pieces, working with Danielle Dark and his group at the Alhambra when he was doing a run over there. And that was a blast, because he was a character. And I've got a couple of him. I didn't bother with the tattoos, man. You know, it's like, how much can you do? And how much of Danielle was the tattoos, and how much was the force of the person? I wish that I had had a chance to do some work with Bachung, because it arrived just at the time that he was getting sick. It was going to happen, and it didn't happen. So that bums me out. I'd like to come back to this work in a sense. I guess I have, but in a different way. And this is, you know, Geraldine and one of her partners had me do the project with State of the Art at the Pompidou, where they set up in the main auditorium, had a camera going down at my hands, and had me working on a light table. So the camera was feeding the images of what I was doing back behind Adam Green and Carl Barat as they were playing. This is in September 2009. So this is some of the evidence that exists from that. That's Adam and his group. And this one, which I'll hold it up for you to see, I think it's rather beautiful, is just before, can you get that?
Yeah.
It's very diaphanous. It's Adam just before he smashed the guitar.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So we were a little we were really lucky. And I think that that really kind of shows the moment.
Yeah.
And yeah. And so these are just a couple other little variaces. This is some drunk guitarist over at my studio in New York in a typical kind of a situation, in a controlled situation. And sometimes when I get sent out to do editorial work,
Nice.
this is Patrick Udeline, right? And another one is Jarvis Cocker.
You're good.
Yeah. So, you know, he's a great guy, great fellow, both of them. So this was the finished piece of Patti Smith, which I don't care for as much as the roughs, but it's fun in a weird way. It's Patti and her son and the oud player for Rashid Taha out at the Fondation Cartier. And
Oh, that was like, what, 3-4 years ago?
more than
6
that.
years ago?
Yeah, more than that.
Yeah, because I was there and she had her photographs downstairs too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And they did an impromptu concert, her and her
Right,
son.
exactly, and with the drummer who was
There were-
horrible too. And then,
I remember a drummer because it was like a press conference.
okay, so it
There
wasn't
like
that.
10
It,
people.
so no. This was the time before that when she did her whole thing.
Oh, but
the
this
whole
was just
bit.
a press conference, so that
Yeah.
might have gone on later. For
Yeah, this
people.
was a concert in the garden.
Yeah, no, this was just the press conference.
She was herself. Let's put it that way. Now this is a couple pieces that were done for a Japanese artist, a Japanese musician, and first he picked that one for the record,
Mhm.
and he wound up using that one because I think that he said, "Oh, I hate myself so much, and you show how much I hate myself. That one I can get away with. That one I can't." I was like, "Really? Interesting, buddy." I still would have taken that piece that he didn't use, but
Yeah, well, he sees something we didn't.
yeah, I think that's often the case with art, anyways. That people see what they want to see, whether it's there or not, or any intention on my part. Anyway, that's the good part about just being able to shut it off, all the crap, and just try and get what you can get. You know.